We'll go ahead and get started with our first general admissions information for John A. Logan College. In this one, we're going to talk about general admissions, degrees and certificate options, and any of those requirements just to begin. And also, if you're unsure of a certain program or degree, we'll cover all of those options. So first I want to talk about our admissions process. We are an open admissions institution. So what that means is that anyone applies, is able to attend the college, and we have no application fee. So it doesn't cost anything to apply. So depending on which type of student you are, there are different applications to fill out. We have a first-time freshman application. So if you have never taken college courses at all, we have a transfer application for students who are transferring from another institution. And we also have a dual credit early college application and a few others as well. One question we see a lot is people who are applying, maybe they came to the college in the past, but maybe it's been 5 years or so. If it's been longer than 2 years, then students need to reapply and do that first time freshman application again. Students will need to send final high school transcripts with the graduation date. So you would order those through your school. They do have to be final official transcripts, and then submit residency verification so that we know that you live in the district, so that you get an in-district tuition rate. And then you can do that. You'll see whenever you apply, it's going to prompt you to upload documents if you would like to do it then. And these are a couple of the residency verification options that you could use. Driver's license, a lease, or a utility bill, or something that's in your name. Once you've applied, what you can expect is basically like a welcome letter. So it comes in the form of via email though. So there's nothing mailed to your home address. You'll get it via email to whatever email you used to apply with. So you'd want to check that, and it's going to tell you your next steps. Receive your student ID, your John A. Logan email, which is called VolMail, and it'll kind of go through those next steps for you. Once you've done that, your next steps are going to be to go ahead and set up an appointment with advisement and make sure your financial aid and stuff like that is done, but we'll talk more in depth about those in a little bit. So when we're talking to students who are considering John A. Logan as an option, if they haven't taken any classes with us before, or maybe they're on the fence and they think they want to go out to a university right away. So what we have here is kind of a chart that shows this is based on 15 credit hours, which would be considered full-time to complete a 2-year degree with just taking fall and spring classes. So if a student wanted to complete that degree, they haven't taken any classes before, they don't want to take summer classes, they just want to take classes in the fall and the spring, they would need to take 15 credit hours to complete that degree in that amount of time. Now, 12 credit hours is considered full-time student, so they don't have to take 15, but we recommend that if they're trying to complete within 2 years. So this is the average cost per credit hour at regional universities in our area. So John A. Logan is $145 right now per credit hour. And then you can see there based on the regional universities kind of what that cost is. So if you're going to start and you're wanting to receive your associate's degree in a specific area, or just a general associate's degree, and we'll talk about those, we'll break those down later, then you'd be saving about $20,000 just by completing those first 2 years with us, and then going on and finishing that third and fourth year at the university institution. And we'll talk some more about what that transfer looks like as well, and what that means once you transition from John A. Logan to a university. One of your next steps before you are going to be taking your classes with us is we need a test score. So a placement test, the option we have at Johnny Logan is called the AccuPlacer test, and that's going to be testing you for English and math so that we see which of those you're going to need to be placed into. So your academic advisor is going to work with you on looking at your test scores to see what you placed into. Now, maybe you had some AP scores or courses that you took in high school, and those might qualify you, or the SAT, ACT scores as well. So you're going to successfully complete a dual credit English 101 course at their high school. They wouldn't have to take the placement test or the dual credit math course within the high school as well. Have a 3.0 for their high school GPA, and they've taken all 4 years of high school math. These are some areas where you would not have to test into that. We do have some other tests that you would have to take, depending on what programs you're going into. We have certain programs that you have to test into, and these are called our restricted allied health admissions programs. And we have a variety of them, but we have certificate and degree options. So our LPN, our medical assisting phlebotomy, these are some certificates. You don't have to take the AccuPlacer test, I don't think, for phlebotomy. You might only have to take the reading one. Do you know, Michelle, on that one for phlebotomy? I can't remember. However, I think that that one may be a little bit different. For these different degree options for ADN and adult cardiac diagnostic, medical sonography, surgical tech, medical lab tech, all of those, you're going to have a separate TEAS test that you would take to test into that program. So you have to apply for admissions, doing the regular admissions application. And then you would also need to take a placement test for a TEAS test to see if you test into these programs. So that would be a separate additional test. And then these programs actually have their own separate additional applications. Nursing's deadline is always March 1st. And then the other programs like surgical tech, diagnostic medical sonography, those are March 31st for those deadlines. So it's really important to check our testing website, our allied health admissions website, to look and see at those placement packets to see all of the dates and qualifications to make sure you don't miss any dates. And you can, these tests are not free. The AccuPlacer test is free. The TEAS test does cost. And in a lot of instances, if you are a student in our district high schools, our staff come out to the schools and they test. We do encourage students to retest, especially if you tested the last time maybe as a sophomore. We want you to go ahead and retest maybe as a senior if you're needing to, because you've probably had some additional English or math, so you would probably score better than what you scored as a sophomore. Michelle is here and she's joining us out of our academic advisement office. So Michelle, do you have anything else to add about these restricted allied health admissions, the tests or anything like that?
The biggest thing with the test to keep in mind is, especially if a student is doing a program that's going to be math heavy. So for example, if they're going to go the STEM route, or if they're going to go into education where you have to have a variety of math classes, retaking that AccuPlacer test or sending in some sort of AP, if you took dual credit math, anything like that's going to be super helpful. If we go based off of your scores from sophomore year, 9 times out of 10, students are going to place into like Algebra 1, maybe a geometry, and realistically, they should be placing at a much higher college level math by the time they're a senior. So that's a big one that we see happen quite often.
Okay, that's good information. So as we're leading into this conversation a little bit more about programs and working with your academic advisor, that's really important to make sure that you're communicating well with your academic advisor, because that's going to allow them to see what classes to best fit you in for your program and based on your previous experience and test scores. So So I kind of covered this already. So how and when to apply, you're going to do that on the website. So you want to review admissions packets for those programs, check the checklist on the Johnny Logan websites for those admissions programs. And I talked about the TEAS testing requirements. Register for pre-entrance exam, and you have to pay a fee at that time whenever you register. You complete the program application by the deadline. And so you can start looking at this and applying and taking these tests. Just want to make sure that you have that meet that deadline of March 1st or March 31st. And that would be to get into the programs next fall. So we're talking about fall 2026. And then completing any prerequisites for those programs. So certain programs have prerequisites. For instances, the nursing program, I know they have a new prereq that would be their Bio 205. Is also the oh, Michelle, what's the other? Is there another prerequisite for? I'm trying to think of medical terminology. Is it a prereq or no?
No. So to get into the actual program, the only class they have to have completed prior to admission at the current moment is Bio 205, which is Anatomy Physiology 1. Um, Before they complete the LPN program, they also have to complete Anatomy Physiology 2 and I believe a speech course. And then
Mhm.
before they complete the second year of the nursing program, which is the ADN program, that's where they have to complete the chemistry and the microbiology.
Okay, excellent. So yeah, it kind of depends on which one and what year you're going into then. All right. So then, and you can see here, you can visit the admissions website and those restricted allied health programs to find these packets and kind of the checklist for each of those, depending on what program you're going into. Like Surge Tech has its own medical lab tech, the cardiac sonography, they all have their own packets and checklists. So you just want to make sure that you don't miss anything on those. All right, Michelle, you want to talk about these different degrees and certificates and all the options and things that we have, or anything that we might not have listed on this list as well?
Yeah. So, a lot of the times when people say they're going to go to the junior college, they think, I'm just going to start out with my generals. I'm going to knock out my gen eds and then I'm going to move on. Yes, that's super important. You can for sure knock out your gen eds with us. There's a new thing that the state of Illinois is doing where you can be gen ed core complete. So what that looks like is if you come to a junior college first and you complete all of your general education courses prior to transferring to that 4-year school, think of it kind of like a capsule. So if you take all of those courses and you complete them in the capsule, when you transfer to that next school, they're not going to nitpick each individual course that you've taken because they see it as you've completed your general education, so they don't need to look at it anymore. All of the courses or all of the programs that are kind of listed in front of you will transfer for different things based on kind of what a student is majoring in. So our default for any student who comes in and says, I plan on going to a 4-year school, the first thing that we're going to probably put them in is going to be an associate in arts or an associate in science degree. It's very generalized. It has that core complete that the state of Illinois wants you to have when you transfer, and it gives you a chance to kind of be flexible with your options when it comes to your elective. So if you know that your major long term is going to be psychology, in that elective category, we're going to be taking some psychology courses or some sociology courses to help kind of get you to where you want to be. Associate in science is very similar. So the biggest difference you're going to see with an associate in arts degree and an associate in science degree is an associate in science will have you take one extra math class and one extra science class. So if you're like me and you're not a math or a science person, you're probably not going to be on that program unless you're going into that field. So unless you come in and you say that you know you're going to go something in the science realm, you're just not entirely sure what, um, you'd probably stick with the associate in arts degree. Now, fine arts are going to be a little bit different. So when you think of fine arts, think a little bit more of your artsy side. So we have an associate in fine arts that's a music, more of a music performance direction. And I believe we have one that's in the actual arts. So if you're wanting to be, some sort of an artist or you want to get your AFA or your BFA in something, those are the kind of directions we would put you in for those degrees. The beauty of a fine arts degree is that you don't have as many of the general electives, general education based things, because a lot of what you're doing is you're crafting that art. So a lot of the classes that you're going to take are going to be, specifically focused on what your major is. And the Associate in Engineering Sciences degree, that's our AES degree for engineering students, that is going to set a student up to get all of their prerequisites for an engineering program. So think maybe computer science could fall into that category, and a lot of the times it's just engineering. So mechanical, civil, chemical, all of those different types of engineering, you have to get up to calculus 3, you have to do physics 1 and 2, and there's usually a handful of other electives that are required prior to your transfer at your four-year school, regardless of where you're transferring. So doing that AES gives you an opportunity to knock out all of those required prerequisites, and we kind of piece together everything else based on where you think you're going to transfer. The last two that are listed on here, so the Associate in Applied Science, that's going to be more of our hands-on degrees. So think cosmetology, it could be welding, HVAC, construction, even some of those healthcare programs are going to be applied science. So when I think applied science, I think hands-on. So if I'm learning more of a skill or a trade, I'm not necessarily planning on transferring. I can if I want to, that's certainly an option. But a lot of the times with somebody who does an associate in applied science degree, their goal is to learn something and then they're going to go directly into the workforce. And then the last one that's listed on here is an associate in general studies. So we tend to kind of stray away from this degree if we can, just because it doesn't have much of a structure. The reason that this can be helpful for a student is if they're doing a program like EMT and maybe they're on financial aid or they have a whole bunch of credit that they've taken from all of these years and they want to just piece it together and have an associate's degree. A good example would be maybe you have, a mother who decided to have a child and she wanted to stay home with that child for the first several years of life. And then once they're finally in school, maybe she wants to have an associate's degree so she can go substitute teach or she can, go do something different. But maybe she took a bunch of high school dual credit. She might have taken some classes in cosmetology. Maybe she, dabbled in nursing and wasn't quite sure which direction she wanted to go. With an associate in general studies like that, we're able to take all of those kind of random credits and piece them together in a degree where it can be beneficial for a student.
Okay, thank you. And then I'm not sure if I have the next slide talking yeah, a little bit more in depth about some of these. What about any of these certificate options? Can you touch on like what that difference is there with degrees and certificates?
So a lot of the times a degree is going to be a 2-year degree. So in order to have your associates in pretty much anything, we're talking 63 total credit hours. So usually we're talking, roughly 2 years of time to get that degree based on how many credits you would take each semester. With something like a certificate, there's a variety of certificate options that you can get. So a really good example would be welding. If you come to John A and you have an interest in welding, you can just do a single semester and you can be on your way. But we have 3 different types of welding certificates that you can get that are single semesters. So if you stack all 3 of those together, you're only a semester shy of getting your associate's degree. So sometimes what we have students do is maybe they'll come in and they'll do one certificate or maybe a second certificate because they want to improve their work skills and maybe they already have a job that's full-time somewhere else. I know personally in my experience, I have a younger brother who works in the trades, and there are some people that he works with who need to improve their welding skills. So they've sent some of his, coworkers to John A to complete a welding certificate for just a semester so they can improve on that one skill, and then they'll go right back into the workforce. Another option that students have within the certificates is that maybe you start off small and you do one cert, maybe two, and you really kind of like the whole school thing and maybe you want to learn more about it. Those degrees are stackable. So if you start out with one welding certificate and then you want to get a second one and you're like, well, I'm only a year away, I might as well get my associate's degree, you have the option to do that. So a lot of our students who fall into the applied sciences realm or the applied tech realm, which again could be your cosmetology. There's a variety of healthcare. There's a couple of like more hands-on businessy ones like accounting or like administrative assistant. And then you have a couple more options in the applied science, like in auto Welding has some, HVAC has some, where you can gain that certificate so it can also help you in the workforce.
And we see that a lot too with like you mentioned with welding. We see it a lot in cosmetology too, that students maybe think they just want to do the certificate, but then you really start talking to them and they're like, "Oh, well, I want to run my own and have my own business, my own salon." You really kind of need some of those business courses and stuff too then.
Mhm.
That would kind of help out to get that full associate degree and maybe even pick up some business courses. Um, and then our graphic design program, it's actually restructured a little bit and changed since we last did this. And that one is called now, it's called is it
It's digital media technology. So
media
we have
technology?
two types of media programs that are actually pretty popular at the moment. One of them is media arts, so that's a little bit more of your um, journalism, maybe marketing, photography kind of a direction. The digital media technology program is a little bit more, think like graphics, animation, video game type design. So there's a little bit more of a tech side to that one, whereas with the media arts program, that's a little bit more of the artsy side.
And I see here too on this slide, it looks like, oh, let me go back here. Students who are pursuing a degree in education, most instances they're going to be an associate in arts, unless they're going for music education. Is that the only one that would be a little different? Or what if they were wanting to teach art? Do you know if that would then probably still fall under the fine arts associate or
I'm not actually completely sure on that.
okay.
The really anytime a student is going to go into education, especially if they're thinking secondary education like you would with music, most of the time your major is actually going to be housed within that department and you just take a couple education courses on the side at the first 2 year level. So if somebody wants to teach maybe high school history, for example, they're most likely going to be a history major and take a couple education classes because when they get to their third and fourth year at that transfer location, that's when they're going to take some upper level history and they would do the teacher education program. So it really kind of, it differs based on what you're wanting to teach.
Okay. All
So
right.
oh, go ahead.
You're good. Go ahead.
So another part of my role, yes, I do all things academic advisement, but I also help students kind of learn how to utilize their advisor. So think of us a little bit more as kind of like your school counselor at the college level. We kind of just help you navigate what you're doing next. So if you come to your advisor and maybe you're stuck between majors. I've had students before who come to me and they're thinking they might want to be an elementary education major, but they also might want to go to med school. Those are two very different things that we're trying to have a conversation about. So being very open to your advisor is something that we appreciate, but it's also something that we can help you navigate as well. Because there are resources that we have if you're undecided on your major or if you're not quite sure what you're going to do next. Another thing that my office really enjoys doing is when we sit down with a student for the first time, we come up with a student success plan or a student academic plan. So when we create that, the idea is that you know exactly what courses you're going to be taking each semester. We know exactly which courses you're going to be taking each semester, so we're all on the same page. That way, if something were to happen and maybe you have to go part-time for a semester, or life happens, maybe you don't do super well in a class and we need to look at retaking it in a later date, we can kind of see in real time what that's going to look like in your academic plan. So if we have to move something around, what other courses are going to have to shift in order for you to still graduate when you're hoping to graduate. We are the ones that you would kind of go to for guidance on what you're going to add to your schedule, or if you have questions about dropping a course. You are able as a student to enroll yourself. You do not have to use our office, but we're a great tool when it comes to getting some guidance as to what you should be doing, especially if you're a student who plans to transfer for a four-year school. We have so many ways that you can transfer to different schools that using our advisors and the knowledge that they have is going to probably save you some time and it's probably going to save you some money. Um, The other thing that we really focus on is just going to be, helping you. Our goal is to make sure that you are supported and that you have all of the things that you need to be successful. So if you come to me and you're struggling with something, maybe you're, stressed out, or maybe you feel like you need additional support. Maybe you just need somebody to help walk you through what they talked about in your math class yesterday. We have different resources across campus that can kind of help you with those different areas. So as your advisor, we're the ones you can go to and kind of just vent about what's going on. And we can get you to the right people so we can make sure that you're staying on top of what you need to stay on top of in order to keep your grades up and be successful.
Yeah, thank you. I want to go back to something you touched on. So you said students can they can add courses to their schedules and stuff now. Are students able to do that right out of the gate, or do they first time they register for classes, does that have to be with an academic advisor? Is that
Yeah. So the very first time that a student would enroll, so if this would be your very first semester, you do have to work with an advisor. The goal behind that is we want to make sure that we put you on the correct plan, and we want to make sure that you have everything that you need in order to get your semester started off correctly. So we'll help make sure that you have your login information, that you have all of the access to our D2L system, which is your online learning system. Because if you kind of just try to do that at home, you maybe would miss out on some of that information.
Yeah, and I just want to also kind of emphasize that, like Michelle talked about, it's important to still kind of keep that relationship with your advisor. You may be registering yourself, but we highly encourage that you still meet with the advisor to make sure you're on that path. And also, the same thing goes with dropping courses, because there are implications for dropping courses if you start getting into not completing a certain percentage of your program or of those courses. That can start impacting financial aid, which is another piece that we'll talk about here in a little bit. Michelle, you mentioned that we have services on campus for students who are maybe undecided on a major. I mean, academic advisement is still a great location to go and get some help with that. We have an advisor who's kind of dedicated to undecided majors, but we also have a career services office who can kind of help students as well and kind of work together with that undecided major advisor to see and figure out. There's an assessment that students can take called the Journey Assessment, and it's kind of like a strengths finder, and it kind of matches you up based on some questions that you answer on your strengths, what your interests are, and lets you know different, career paths that might be a good option for you. So even for those students who are undecided, it's really important to speak with an academic advisor about that. All right, so to kind of move on to paying for college and what that will look like and financial aid and scholarships. So the FAFSA becomes available on October 1st each year, so it is currently open. Right now, we like to kind of talk about and break down those barriers of what's a grant versus what's a scholarship versus what's a student loan. Because if you are kind of like I was starting out with college straight out of high school, I didn't have family that had attended college before. So it was all of this was new territory for me. So, I didn't know right away like what the difference was in a grant and a scholarship. So grants are free money that you do not have to pay back. We have the federal Pell Grant and we have the MAP grant. So the MAP grant is a state grant and the Pell Grant is a federal grant. So MAP grant is based on like a certain amount. So no matter what school, also this is important to note, no matter what school you are going to in Illinois, you're going to get the same amount of financial aid. So if you're attending an institution, maybe a junior college that has a lower tuition rate like we do, that money's going to stretch further. Your dollars are going to stretch further than if you are maybe starting off at a university that has a tuition rate that's much higher. With if you're going to still only get that same amount of financial aid. So you don't have to pay back grants. For Pell Grant and MAP Grant, it's based on need and income, and it's all calculated based off of tax returns. So you want to fill out that application sometime early, mid-October. MAP Grant is a kind of first come, first serve basis. So the state of Illinois only has so much money that they award, and they don't tell people when it's running out exactly. They kind of monitor it until it gets close, and then they'll like have a cutoff date. So if you don't apply for financial aid early on, then you might miss out on that MAP grant money. Same thing with scholarships. Scholarships are free money. You don't have to pay that back. We don't do federal loans, or yeah, we don't do student loans. So if students are taking out loans for some reason, it's through a private lender, and we don't really encourage that at the community college level. So we just mostly focus on grants and scholarships. So we have a foundation scholarship. It's one easy application. It considers you for hundreds of different scholarships. So you fill out an application that takes about 10, 15 minutes. And then it's kind of like online shopping. You create an account, you fill out your information, and it'll auto match you with certain scholarships. So you have to log back into that platform after a couple of weeks, give it a little bit of time, and then log back in, see if it auto matched you with any scholarships. And if it does, sometimes they're going to need some additional information. You might have to provide an answer to an essay question or provide some documentation. And you don't have to be the best. You didn't have to be the best student in high school with 4.0 GPA and all of that. Now, a good GPA usually helps in qualifying for scholarships, but there's a variety of reasons that donors set up scholarships and create these. So it could be you have a parent that works at ISIN or at Walmart, or maybe even check with your employer if you work somewhere and see if they have scholarships. So check out in the community as well. If you're a high school student, a lot of times your academic or your school counselor is going to be a great resource for you to see if there's any scholarships with the school or in the community, and then they can kind of help you out with that. Um, Michelle, do you want to talk a little bit about our ambassador scholarship that's listed as well?
Yep. So we have a program where we each year on October 1, so the application is open. We'll accept applications until January 15th. Then we will do an interview process, and we usually can award around 11 scholarships each year. What that looks like for the student is it is tuition for up to 16 credit hours in the fall and spring semesters for 2 years. And in exchange for that, they are a college ambassador. So they help out at some events. They might be part of our recruitment team. And we also focus on community service. So we do a lot of outside of the college community service hours, as well as associated with different college organizations. So it's pretty good program to be a part of.
And that deadline for the foundation scholarship is February 1st, and then the ambassador scholarship is it January 15th? Is that correct?
Mhm. Yep.
So that one is a little bit earlier there, just because that process looks a little bit different. They go through those applications and interview applicants, so that process is a little bit different. So we also have a lot of other programs on our campus that help students in terms of financial need. So we have a program called the Perkins. It's a grant. And we also have a program called PATH, and that's for our nursing. Do you know if that extends beyond nursing, Michelle, by chance? Do you know if
It
that's
does.
any of our allied?
I think it's any allied health major that can apply for that program.
That's what I'm thinking as well. So these Perkins and PATH are two programs that, again, it's based on financial need. So most likely, if a student, receives financial aid, although they do have their own separate applications, but they're really easy one-page applications to fill out on the website. but it can step in and help cover cost of things like supplies, books. A lot of those programs Michelle was talking about, those hands-on programs like welding or cosmetology, they have supplies that come along with those classes, and you're going to have, the appropriate toolkits and different things that you may need. And Perkins and Path can step in if you qualify and pay for those, as well as books in certain cases. Is there anything else that you can think of, Michelle, to mention there about those?
Sometimes a student can qualify for both. I'm not sure if you mentioned that.
Yeah,
So, for example, if somebody is doing our diagnostic cardiac sonography program, they could have, Perkins help supply all of their textbooks for the semester, but they can also apply for PATH and have PATH cover the cost of their scrubs for the semester. So it's a really good opportunity for a student who's doing any sort of program in those fields to have a lot of additional support outside of just their financial aid. So usually if a student qualifies for one and they're in a program that both could be served, we encourage you to apply for both.
that's true. That's a good point. Um, all right. So I think that kind of covers the basics of financial aid and scholarships. Um, One thing I didn't that's not noted on here, but we do have student employment on campus. So if students are wanting to work a job on campus, maybe in between classes, that is hired through our employment office at the college. So it's hired through HR. But we have a variety of student workers throughout campus. My office has student workers, Michelle's office has student workers. A lot of the times it's more office work, and you're kind of like that front person answering phones, filing, different things like that. However, we do have some other opportunities on campus that hire student workers, like at our fitness center and our aquatic center. So that is another way to kind of receive financial aid, or to have a job and be paid. It's minimum wage. They work around your class schedule, which is super, nice, especially if you have like a long commute, and maybe you have a little bit of a space in between your classes. And when you're not busy in the offices, most offices kind of also allow you to work on homework or something on the side. So that's something to keep in mind as an option as well. All right, we have just a couple more minutes here. We're going to talk about just John and Logan as an institution. Yes, we're an educational institution, but we're a lot more than that. We're a community with opportunities for our students to engage in a robust campus life. We have over 30 different student organizations and clubs. A lot of those are things that are tied directly maybe to a student's major, or some of them are just for social interactions. So if they're tied to a major, for example, we have a cosmetology club, we have a welding club, we have a lot of clubs that are associated for students who are in that specific major. Education, we have an Educators Rising club. Then on the flip side of that, we have some that are just more for fun. Um, we've had anything from board games to we've had co-ed soccer before. We have honors, like kind of like an honor society, PTK, and student senate. Those are some of our student organizations. We also consider our student ambassadors one of our student organizations as well. But it's a great way to build relationships, build your resume through volunteer experience, and through those leadership experiences that you're going to gain, and kind of engage in that civic engagement and that community involvement. Along with those clubs and organizations, we host at least one event per month um, through our student development office. And a lot of those times, those events are things that have like free food and music or prizes. They partner with different offices. I know with Michelle's office in advisement, they've partnered with a few different things on getting students to register and get into their classes. Or maybe transfer days and things like that. They've partnered up before We also partner with our financial aid office. So there's a lot of ways for students to be engaged and get involved. And I think that in the past, there's kind of been a misconception of, oh, a junior college, I'm not going to get any student life experience there. I'm not going to have fun. But it really is what a student makes of it. So if a student gets involved, participates in clubs, is a student ambassador and they're kind of being involved, they're going to get more out of campus and more out of their experience versus just going to class and leaving and going to work. Or the more you put yourself out there, the more you're going to kind of reap those benefits. So, Michelle, do you have anything to add from any of those experiences or anything?
I don't think so. But I've had a lot of students that have told me, in their second year that they wish they would have gotten involved a little bit earlier because they, had found some friends their second year and they're like, I just feel like I didn't really get a lot of time to do that. So I would definitely say, in your first semester, take a chance, go to some of the events, join a club, go to a meeting. Even if you don't stick it out with that club, that's okay, but you might meet a friend that you might keep for a long time. So it's never going to hurt to kind of put yourself out there and say hi to somebody you don't know.
Yeah, that's a good point. I didn't think about that because, at our institution, most students are only there for 2 years. So if they wait until that second year to get involved, they really don't have a lot of time after that to make those connections and keep that going. So um, that's all that we have, I believe, as far as our presentation goes. So, if you ever have any questions, you can always reach out to us, contact us. Michelle, what's that email address that they use to reach your office?
The easiest way to get a hold of the advisement office is registration at jalc.edu.
And we have on our website as well on our homepage. You can schedule a visit. So if you're interested in maybe just coming to check out campus or meeting with an advisor and you're not quite ready to register yet, but you want to talk to an advisor about some options, they're always open to that. And we are currently registering for our upcoming spring and summer semesters, correct?
Mhm.
All right. So now is a great time to kind of connect with us and see about getting registered. And then again, if you have any questions, just send us an email or come out to campus and visit us. So thank you all for spending some time with us. And as always, we will have this posted on our college YouTube channel. Thank you, Michelle.